In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how much battery capacity is enough and how can you figure that out. Hello everybody, welcome to Freely Roaming. My name is Dan. So 100 amp hour batteries have become sort of the de facto standard for lithium iron phosphate batteries. That's because when it's put together, the size is very similar to a Group 24 traditional AGM battery. So to consumers, it's a familiar size and shape if they're looking for a replacement. Now, to be totally honest, they're good for general and occasional use for weekenders, but if you're traveling full-time in your camper, it is most likely not enough. I spent many years before upgrading to lithium with AGM batteries living in my camper. My last pack before I upgraded to lithium in my camper was a 224 amp hour AGM pack. And I was careful to not draw beyond 110 amp hours so I could maximize its cycle life. During those years, I was constantly concerned with the health and the state of charge of my batteries. And I was constantly checking to see whether or not I would get enough sun in the morning to start recharging and replenish my consumption overnight. I would be fine during long stretches of sunny days, but as soon as weather turned bad, our battery was potentially in trouble. Regardless of the kind of battery chemistry, whether it's lead acid or lithium iron phosphate, running them all the way down to 0% can be detrimental to the life cycle of your battery. They will last the longest if full discharge cycles are minimized. So the best way to avoid that kind of trouble is to make sure you have enough capacity so you don't ever have to draw them too far beyond to cause degradation. So with these 100 amp hour batteries, you can actually buy a multiple and just put them in parallel. To safely put your batteries in parallel, a few things you have to be careful of. First, you have to make sure that the battery packs are as identical to each other as possible. That means the cells, if not identical, they're as similar as possible as far as manufacturing date, manufacturer, and capacity. And that's kind of hard to do if you're upgrading over time. So let's say you start with a 100 amp hour battery, a couple years later you want to add on some more. It's pretty much impossible to find an identical battery with the same amount of use that you already have on the existing one. And also you have to have the know-how to be able to put them together, knowing how to connect them in parallel safely, what kind of wire gauge to use, how to make custom cables, crimping cable lugs safely. So before we get that far, I think what's important to know is how to gauge what your daily consumption is. And the way to do that is with an energy audit. To do an energy audit, basically what it means is to figure out all the appliances that are drawing power inside your camper and figure out how much they use throughout a 24-hour period, adding them all up to see how much capacity you need. Keep in mind that you're going to have DC appliances and also AC appliances. AC appliances are your household plugs, which will require an inverter that's connected to your battery. And that inverter is also going to have some power consumption as well. So to figure out your energy consumption, I'm going to give you an example of what a typical full-time traveler in a relatively small-sized camper might look like. So let's start with DC power consumption. If you're in a camper the size of a van, chances are you have a 12-volt compressor fridge. And 12-volt compressor fridges like the one we have from Nomad, we have the CFX3 75DZ. It draws about 35 watts when it's on, and it's on about 25 to 30% of the time. So we'll just say it's 8 hours. That'll draw 280 watt hours a day. We also run a roof fan. We actually run a couple of roof fans, and each one of them draw anywhere between 20 to 30 watts. And we run them about 7-8 hours a day. So we'll just say 140 watt hours for that. We have a lot of USB charging that's happening in the van as well. Generally speaking, USB devices charge anywhere from 5 watts to 20. If you have USB-C power delivery, it can draw a little bit more. But for us, the average is about 30 watts, and we charge about 4 hours a day. So that's going to draw another 120 watt hours. And then, of course, there's lights. Lights don't draw that much power, especially these days with all the LEDs. So LED lights draw about 5 watts for relatively bright light. So if you run those at night for 8 hours, maybe you have a couple of them, you run them for 4 hours each, that's going to draw about 40 watt hours. So that's all the general stuff on the DC side. So let's talk about the AC side. For us, the only time we run our AC inverter is when we're charging a computer. And computers can draw a lot of power, especially if you're doing things like video editing or gaming. If you're working on your computer throughout the day, chances are you're going to have it plugged in all the time. A large laptop has usually close to 100 watt hours of capacity in the battery. So if you have it plugged in and it runs for about a couple hours per charge, you're going to basically charge it 4 times a day, which will draw 400 watt hours. And if that's the only AC device that's charging, the only other AC draw you're going to have is the inverter standby, which is anywhere between 5 to maybe 20 watts, depending on the efficiency of your AC inverter. So let's say it's 15 watts and runs for about 8 hours, and that's another 120 watt hours. So if you add all those up, you're talking about 1,100 watt hours of battery draw per day. A 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery has 1,280 watt hours of capacity. So basically, if that's all you have, you're going to draw your battery all the way down in a 24-hour period. That might sound like you'll be fine because you'll have a few amp hours left at the end of the 24-hour cycle, but that leaves you no room for cloudy days or camping in the shade if it's too hot out. And another rule of thumb I like to tell people is if you want to replenish that daily use using solar, I recommend having 3 watts of solar for every 1 hour of daily battery consumption. So if you're consuming 90 amp hours in a 24-hour period, you want to have 270 watts of solar. We can just round that up to 300 watts of solar. And that's sort of the minimum, and it depends on where you are on Earth. If you're at a higher latitude, you're going to need more because the sun is going to be steeper, especially if your solar panels don't tilt. Because of these reasons, this is why I think the typical 100 amp hour battery is not going to be enough for a full-time traveler in a camper van. You're going to want to at least double that battery capacity to give you some headroom. If this sample scenario sounds like you, then you probably want to have something like this AmpereTime 190 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. The advantage of a bigger pack instead of 2 smaller packs connected in parallel is that you're going to save a little bit of weight. This is about 45 pounds versus 2 batteries connected in parallel is going to be a little over 50 pounds. That doesn't sound like a lot, but every pound matters when you have a van that's already very heavy. It's also easier to connect. You don't have to worry about a parallel connection. You just have your typical positive and negative conductors that go from your battery to your electrical system. It also takes up far less space. 200 amp hour batteries connected in parallel is going to take up about 30% more space than just one of these 190 amp hour batteries. So something like this will give you 2,432 watt hours, which if you're consuming 1,100 watt hours a day, this is going to be a little more than double what you need, which is perfect. So a battery like this is only good if it passes the capacity test. So of course, on this channel, that's what we do when we show batteries. So let me go ahead and show you if this 190 amp hour battery passes its manufacturer's claim. Here's the start of the AmpereTime 190 amp hour 12 volt lithium iron phosphate battery. I'm running 2 of these DC testers at 10 amps each. Because this is a bigger capacity battery, we can draw at a comparable C rate that we were doing to the 100 amp draw. So we're drawing 20 amps each, and this will probably take, I don't know, a good 8 to 10 hours depending on how much capacity we get out of this. 8 hours in, we are at about 185 amp hours drawn, and about 30 watt hours combined. So this is getting really close. We got another about 5 watt hours per battery tester to go, and then we're gonna hit the 190 amp hour mark. Well over 190 amp hours now. It's also well over 2,400 watt hours. So in a few moments this will dip into the 10 point and change voltage range, which means we're gonna be shutting down soon. Voltage is dropping like a rock now, 10.3. I'm going 8.5 hours over here. I think this one's gonna shut off first,
or they're both going to shut off. Well, actually, they'll probably both shut off at the same time because, yeah, when the BMS cuts off, they'll both go. Oh, there it goes. Done. 97.04 amp hours, 1213.31 watt hours here. We'll add that up to 98.65 amp hours, and in watt hours, 1241.25. So those two combined, let's do some quick math here. 2454.56 watt hours.
So there you go. That's the AmpereTime 190 amp hour battery. You can tell it passes the capacity test without a sweat. AmpereTime is one of the more well-known companies making budget batteries that are high quality. The cost is about $250 per kilowatt hours, which is about as good of a price as you're going to find today in November 2022. It doesn't have any fancy features like Bluetooth or self-heating for cold weather or stuff like that, but you can't really expect that at this price range. I hope this video has helped you to figure out how to do a simple energy audit to figure out exactly how much power you need and also what kind of battery capacity you should buy. I have a blog post on our Freely Roaming website that talks about this topic, and I'll put a link in the description below for you guys to see that. I will also put a link for the AmpereTime battery down there as well if you want to see what the current pricing is. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, hope you guys are having a good weekend. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.